Welcome to Wildly Capable with Kate, a podcast made for those looking to unleash their wildest capabilities. I'm your host, Kate DeRocher, a dating, relationship, and self-worth coach on a mission to help people build better relationships, starting with the one they have with themselves. In each episode, we'll dig deep, turn inwards, and embark on a transformative journey. Together, we'll break free from unhealthy patterns, rip through self-limiting beliefs, heal past wounds, and build unwavering self-worth, all to create healthier relationships as a result. Get ready to explore the wild, untapped potential within you. Are you ready to see just how wildly capable you are? Subscribe now and join us on this empowering adventure. Remember, your wildest capabilities await. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wildly Capable with Kate, the podcast made for those looking to unleash their wildest capabilities. I'm Kate, your host, and I'm on a mission to help you build better relationships, starting first with the one that you have with yourself. I'm really excited about today's episode because it's one that's really special to me. I actually, when I woke up this morning, had no intention of recording an episode on this specific topic. But I went to an event this morning, a woman in business event, and met some amazing female founders and just women who are hardworking, resilient. They have so much intention behind what they're doing. They're on a mission. They have a why. They have a purpose. And they really inspired me. And one of the things that happened when I was at this event, it was like a coffee networking type thing, is one of the girls said, "Hey, let's go around and say who we are, not what we do." And when I got home from that event, I felt so refreshed because I got to learn more of like the inner workings of the women who I was meeting, not just what they do and what they can offer me and how we can help each other. It was so much more than that. So that inspired me to record a podcast episode all about, well, me and my story and how I got to the place that I am in today. Because I know so many of you know that I have difficult dating experiences. I said that in episode 1. I've shared it throughout the podcast, but none of you really fully know my story. All of the things I've been through, all of the ups and downs and twists and turns and the good, the bad, the ugly that I've experienced in my life, both with dating and relationships and just in general. So I felt really just encouraged to share more about who I am so you can understand who you're listening to, who you may end up working with, and just get to know me in general. So it would mean a ton if you listen in. My story is all over the place, and I think many people listening can probably relate to different parts of my story. That's what's helped me become a coach, is I get it. I've been in a lot of the same places that a lot of you listening to this are. I've struggled with the same things. I've had the same internal monologues. I've been there, done that. And that's what's helped me become a powerful coach, because I see you, I understand you, I resonate with you, and I want you to understand why that's so true. So I'm going to share more about my life and what got me here. Okay, thank you for listening. So before I dive into my story, because it is a lot and it gets a little bit heavy at parts, so I want to start with something light. I am so excited to announce that I am hosting my first ever women's retreat this Labor Day weekend in Dripping Springs, Texas. So from August 30th to September 2nd, me and a group of 10 other women will be staying at a beautiful, beautiful luxury Airbnb, and we're going to do a deep dive into our relationships, especially the relationship we have internally with ourselves. So I'm going to lead incredible workshops and intensives and talks all around how to build your self-worth, how to discover who you truly are, how to feel empowered and courageous and powerful in your life. I'm going to help you step into what I call the wild woman. And it's the idea that we are so powerful. We have so much within us. We just have to learn how to unleash it and how to use it properly. So that's what I'm going to coach you on. The weekend's also going to be full of horseback riding, yoga, a sound bath, a art therapy session. We're going to do cold plunges, sauna. We're going to be doing so many incredible healing modalities to help you really shed old wounds, break through old patterns, and become the woman you were always created to be. So if this sounds like something that you're interested in, if it's something that maybe has been tugging at your heart for a while and you just haven't taken the risk or taken the leap to find a retreat like this, well, this is your official sign to come join us this Labor Day weekend, Dripping Springs, Texas, incredible Airbnb with a pool deck overlooking Texas Hill Country. It's insane how pretty it is. And by listening to this podcast, you get an extra special thank you with a 10% off code. So if you go to my website, coachkatederocher.com, use code RETREAT at checkout, you will get 10% off. And I'm also running an early bird pricing for another couple of weeks. So you're going to get 20% off by the end of purchasing. So I would love to see you there. There are 6 spots remaining. So please make one of them yours. It's going to be incredible. There's some amazing, just beautiful, fierce women who are joining, and I would love for you to meet them. I would love for you to be a part of the transformative weekend. So head to coachkatederocher.com, use code RETREAT, and sign up now, and I'll see you there. Okay, with that out of the way, let's dive into a little bit of my background and who I am and how I have been led into this career as a dating, relationship, heartbreak, and self-worth coach and speaker. I feel almost a little bit nervous to share all of this. It just feels very impactful and very important to me. And I've shared bits and pieces through my social media posts or through podcasts, and people who know me know that I wear my heart on my sleeve. So if you are one of my good friends, you know some of the things I've been through in my life. But if you're just listening in, or if you're one of my clients or considering coaching, this will be new to you. So I don't take anything lightly. My story has been it's been very intense, but also very powerful. And there's been so much good that has come out of the pain that I've experienced in my life. So I don't take this episode lightly. And I just want to say that right off the bat. To start, I don't want to go all the way back to childhood because that's a lot to tell you all, but let's go back to high school. So I'm originally from Monroe, Michigan. It's a very small farming town in southeastern Michigan. I think there's something like 20,000 people there. That's it. And in high school, I went to a really small high school. It was roughly 100 kids per class. And my parents specifically chose that school for me because I was a pretty shy kid growing up. I was just quiet. I was very reserved. I wasn't like the person who was going to be like all boisterous and like running around and yelling. That wasn't my personality as a kid. So they thought that it would be beneficial for me to go to a smaller high school so I wouldn't feel overwhelmed or like there was just too much going on for me. And throughout high school, I experienced a lot of difficulties, a lot of traumas. It all kind of started when I got my first serious boyfriend. So I started dating this guy. I'm not going to use his name, but we started dating when I was 15. I was a freshman, maybe sophomore in high school, so pretty young. And we dated from when I was 15 to when I left and went to college for my freshman year of college at Michigan State. Up until that point, we dated, and we were even on and off during my freshman year of college. So we dated for roughly 5 or 6 years. And in that time span, the relationship became and was very toxic. It was very unhealthy. And I've touched on that before in my other episodes, but I've never really gone into depth with what I mean by that. And what I mean is it was emotionally abusive. At times, it was bordering on physically abusive. It was psychologically abusive. It just was very, very unhealthy. I was cheated on in that relationship more times than I still even think I know. I learned a lot of things once I moved away from my hometown. A lot of things came to light. So I don't fully know how many times I was cheated on or with who. But what I have been told, at least, and what I think to be true, is that he cheated on me with a lot of my actually close friends and girls who I was on the cheerleading team with. So I had a classic story. I was a cheerleader. I was the captain of the JV cheer squad, yada, yada. And at first, high school was going really well. The older cheerleaders really liked me. They had a little nickname for me. They called me Fresh. It was great. It's like I felt on top of the world. But then throughout high school and when I started dating this guy, what from my perspective happened is that a lot of the girls became like this sounds so arrogant and I truly don't mean it in an arrogant way, but they became jealous because of I was cheerleading captain. I was the treasurer of our grade. I was doing okay, like as a young kid. And I think that me having the boyfriend and the grades and the yada yada made girls jealous of me. And I feel even weird saying that. I usually try to like jump around that because it does sound so conceited, and I don't mean it in a conceited way whatsoever, because it was not a good thing. It really brought a lot of hardship into my life. And those girls, the girls who were my friends and the girls who I was on the cheer squad with, they started really bullying me. And they started being mean to me behind my back, calling me terrible names, yelling terrible names at me down the school hallway, making up rumors about me, going behind my back with my boyfriend, doing all these things. And at the same time that I was being bullied in high school, I also was in that really toxic, abusive relationship. And through that relationship, especially since it was at a time in my life where I was so young and still developing, like truly my brain was not developed yet. I was only a teenager. I was a really young girl. It really, really impacted and shaped who I became. So for years after that relationship and after graduating high school, I was in kind of a state of like PTSD. I was diagnosed with PTSD and I was very traumatized. There's a whole 6-month period in high school that still to this day, I don't fully remember. I remember bits and pieces. I've even gone back and looked at my old high school planners to try to piece things together, but I don't fully know the timeline or exactly how things played out. But it really affected the way I viewed the world, the way that I felt within my body, just how I showed up in life. I was really struggling. I was grieving a lot of things that I had gone through, and I had no guidance on how to do that. For years, I didn't even fully know that I was doing that. I would go from, we'll get to this part of the story, but I have said this on podcasts before too. I would be in a different relationship and go from relationship to relationship, and I would really struggle in those relationships. And the reason I was having such a hard time is because there were so many things within me stemming from my first unhealthy relationship that were still at play, that hadn't been healed. And it was affecting the way I behaved, the patterns I showed, the way I spoke to myself. It affected every part of me, the men I chose, and I was not aware of that for years. But I'll get to that a little bit more later on. Let me continue with my story. And also just let me say really quickly, I mentioned this at the start of the podcast, but my story does have some difficult elements to it, some trauma to it. So this is kind of your official trigger warning. Trigger warning on abuse, on manipulation, cheating, things like that. I just want anybody listening to this to know that there are elements of my past that are related to those things. So if this gets too heavy for you, turn the podcast off. Don't worry, you can come back on another episode. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you listening in and wanting to learn more about me, but know that I get it. And I don't want you to be triggered or to have too many difficult emotions come up by hearing my story. So this is your official trigger warning. So after graduating, I went to Michigan State for a year. It was about an hour away from my hometown, so it was an easy place for me to go to. I was studying journalism. They had a great journalism program, and I had some family members who were also going to school there, so it was just kind of a no-brainer. And while I was at Michigan State, I still was on and off with this guy from high school. I was trying to move on from him. I was trying to detach and to heal, but he still was kind of in my sphere. And what happened is about halfway through my freshman year of college at Michigan State, I got a phone call one day from my best friend's sister. And it was a best friend who wasn't just a best friend. She was my protector. She was my rock. She was a few years older than me, and she had kind of been assigned to me in my church youth group as kind of like my mentor. Her name was Jenna. So Jenna was such an important part of my life. I didn't have a ton of people protecting me. I didn't have really anybody in my family who fully knew what was going on with my abusive boyfriend. So Jenna became the person who had my back. Jenna became the person who encouraged me to leave and who gave me the wisdom and the strength that I needed to try to get out of that situation. Jenna was more than a friend to me. She was a sister. She was my rock, my guide. She was everything. She was really everything. And freshman year of college, I'm sitting in my dorm and I get a phone call from her older sister, from Jenna's older sister, telling me that Jenna had passed away. She passed away in a car crash while she was living in, I believe it was either Alabama or Arkansas with her grandparents. And that flipped my world upside down. Like I said, I had been dealing with a lot of trauma and things from my high school and from that first relationship, but I never dealt with them fully. So when I heard that Jenna passed away, all of that plus her death piled on and I shut down. I couldn't handle the grieving process. I couldn't maintain my grades at school. I couldn't handle all I was trying to go through and work through from my ex at the same time. It was a lot. So I had to leave Michigan State. I moved back home, moved in with my parents, and continued to take online classes through Michigan State. But I mean, I can't remember any of the classes I took at that time. I think I took economics, and I definitely did not do well in it because A, it's hard, and B, I was going through so much that I could not focus on studying whatsoever. All I remember is spending probably like 6 months in my childhood bedroom in my parents' house grieving. I watched Vampire Diaries almost every day, and I swear that show got me through like the bulk of my grieving process as I was mourning Jenna's death, which is such a funny thing to say, but I didn't leave my room. I was in absolute mourning. I was beside myself. Losing her was and still is one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. And then through that process, at the same time, my ex-boyfriend came back into my life because I was living back at home. I was really vulnerable. I really needed somebody. So I went back to him, who was the person who I really knew best and who knew me best because we had been together for so long. Even if it was so unhealthy, we had a like deep attachment to each other, a deep bond, I guess I would say. We grew up with each other. And so when I moved back home, as I was grieving, he came back into my life. And the cycle of toxicity and unhealth started again. And because that started again, my parents, who were trying to do the best thing for me, trying to get me away from that relationship, they actually kicked me out of the house. And I had to go live by myself in an apartment only like 15 minutes away, because they were trying to get me to stay away from my ex-boyfriend. They were trying to like kind of shake me and get me to wake up. And while maybe that wasn't the best decision they could have made because I felt really abandoned by them because I really needed them at that time as I was grieving Jenna, I understand now, you know, what, 8-9 years later, why they chose that decision. They really were trying to get me away from something that was so unhealthy for me. But while their intentions were good, it didn't leave a good impact on me because, like I said, I felt really abandoned and it really harmed my attachment system. You know, I think that's kind of where, along with everything that was going on with my ex, where my abandonment struggles and my attachment struggles really formed, was through that experience of being kicked out. So I moved into an apartment on my own. I'm roughly 18 years old at this time. I'm working at Buffalo Wild Wings and I'm also working as a lifeguard, just trying to get through, trying to pay for my apartment, trying to pay for my life at such a young age, and fell back into things with my ex. And it was really bad. And with time, more and more happened. He cheated a few more times. I found out other terrible things he was lying to me about. And luckily, looking back on it, I feel like I was lucky now because a different guy kind of came into my sphere, a guy that I knew through, oh yeah, this is something I forgot to mention. Halfway through my senior year of high school, I ended up transferring schools from that small high school to a much bigger one in my hometown because I needed to get away from my ex and from all the girls who were bullying me. So I moved to a different school and it was much healthier for me. Thank goodness that I did that, even though it was so crazy to transfer halfway through my senior year and graduate from a high school full of kids that I had only just met, it still was really good for me to get out of that other environment. But I remembered that because I'm telling you guys that while I was living on my own, while I was in that unhealthy relationship, a guy from the new high school that I'd started going to came into my life and we ended up dating. And while that relationship didn't last, I do believe that that relationship helped me really get away from my high school boyfriend completely and fully for the first time. I had never been able to fully detach in the past because, like I said, we were very attached to each other. So I kind of needed somebody to be there to help me do that. And I don't suggest that now as an adult. I think healing on your own is so important. But again, I was traumatized. I was going through a lot. I couldn't even like think or see straight. I was trying to just pay my bills. So having somebody, a new relationship in my life that got me away from that old relationship, it worked and it was important for that time, even if I know now that there's a healthier way to heal and to leave toxic relationships and to work through the struggles that you're going through. It was beneficial at that time. So through my new relationship, I was able to completely cut out my ex-boyfriend from high school, and I was able to move on, which was incredible. And at the same time that that was happening, I was also still mourning and grieving and healing from Jenna's death. And I ended up deciding that I didn't want to be in my hometown anymore. I knew it was such a dark, difficult place for me. It wasn't a healthy place for me to be in anymore. So I started looking into colleges in California. Moving to California had always been my dream. I wanted to be an actress. I grew up doing musical theater. I grew up studying ballet and doing dance classes. So I wanted to be a performer. And obviously, California, Hollywood, it's a no-brainer. So I started applying to colleges in California. I applied to like University of California, Santa Barbara. I applied to like a couple different like city colleges, community colleges. I applied to the University of Southern California. And I was able to have the strength to start to explore and envision a new life for myself because I knew it was what Jenna would want for me. Jenna believed in me so heavily and she saw so many good things for me that I couldn't see for myself, that after she passed away, I knew I had to honor her and her memory and start to pursue those things, start to believe in myself for probably one of the first times in a long time. So I applied. And my parents flew me to California to tour the University of California, Santa Barbara. That's where I thought I was going to go. I thought I was going to start in Santa Barbara, then move to LA eventually. And while we were touring Santa Barbara, we flew out of LAX, and that's where the University of Southern California is in Los Angeles. So as we're leaving for our flight, my parents were like, okay, fine, let's just go check out USC. I really don't want you to go there because it's in the middle of like South Central, downtown LA. It's not the safest area, but okay, we're right here, so let's go check it out. So they took me to go see USC, and truly, I got out of the car for 5 minutes. I saw the sign in like the entrance of the campus, and that's all I saw because that's all the time we had, and my mom really didn't want me to go there. So I quickly saw like a little preview of what USC was, but I didn't tour the campus. I didn't see it fully. I had no idea. And we knew at the time that USC was pretty far out of reach for me because it's so expensive. It's even more expensive now, and it just wasn't something financially that my family could easily afford. So not only was it in a rather dangerous part of LA, but it also was extremely expensive. So my parents were pretty against me going there. They also didn't even think it'd be possible. I didn't even think I would get in. But the day we landed back in Michigan after touring the schools in LA and in California, I got a letter in the mail from USC telling me I had been accepted. And I had applied to USC completely on a whim. Literally, the way I discovered that USC even existed is because I was watching Gossip Girl, and one of the main characters, I think his name is Chase. I don't even watch Gossip Girl, but I watched this episode. He was like fighting with his dad who wanted him to go to Yale or some Ivy League like that. And he kept saying, no, I want to go to USC. I want to go to USC. So I Googled USC, and then I discovered, oh, University of Southern California also has the #1 broadcast journalism program. The area I was studying, it had the #1 program. So I applied on a whim. I can distinctly remember filling out my application and giving the most random answers and being like, no way are they going to accept me. I did well in school, but I didn't have the 4.0. I didn't have what the University of Southern California was looking for necessarily. So it felt like a stretch. It just felt like a random thing that I did. But when I got back from California, lo and behold, there was my acceptance letter. And the moment I opened it, saw I was accepted, it was such a spiritual moment because I was so overcome with emotion. I burst into tears, hysterically crying. I could cry thinking about it because it really was like a pivotal moment in my life where I didn't know how I was going to afford going there. I didn't know how I was going to move to a whole new state and city filled with people I have never met. I didn't know a single soul in LA. I didn't know how it was going to be possible, but I knew in that moment when I got my acceptance letter that I had to go. I knew in that moment that USC and being accepted there was given to me by God. It was a gift straight from God himself. So I knew I had to make it happen. And I'm very lucky to say, I'm very fortunate to say that I did make it happen. My family and I worked really hard to afford going there. I took summer classes every single summer back home at the community college in my hometown to save money on credits at USC. And I graduated in 3 years' time instead of 4 years' time. I just stayed on campus for another year, taking like one course so I could graduate with my actual class. But I technically was done with school in 3 years' time. And I did that so my parents wouldn't have to pay for a full 4 year, full time at USC. It would have been 3 years because I went to Michigan State for a year, but they couldn't afford the full time that I would need to get the credits I needed to graduate. So I technically finished early. And it wasn't easy. It was not easy to fly back to Michigan every summer and take my Spanish classes at a community college, take extra classes every summer. I didn't have a life in the summer. I was doing school. But I knew that USC and the opportunity to move to LA was not something that just happened out of thin air. It was something that was given to me. And I knew that I had to step into that challenge, and I knew I had to step into the new life that God was creating for me. So I did. And it was so transformational because not only did it get me out of my unhealthy environment back in my hometown, but it opened up my eyes to a whole new way of life. It opened up my eyes to so many different people and walks of life. Like I said, I was from a very small town. Pretty much everybody there was just white. There were no other cultures that I was introduced to at a young age. So when I went to USC in LA, which is the melting pot of the whole world, I was exposed to so many things. I learned so many things that have shaped me into the woman I am today. So it was an incredible, incredible gift to get to move there and to go to USC because of how much healing it brought to me, because of how it removed me from a space I was no longer supposed to be in, and because of all that it taught me and all that it gave me. But while I was at USC, I still had not worked through everything that I had gone through back in high school with my ex-boyfriend and with the girls who had really hurt me. And because that was all still swimming around inside of me, I was pretty rebellious and acting out and, fell into partying a lot, fell into drinking a lot, fell into just like that really stereotypical college culture. I was in a sorority. I was always at the fraternity parties, things like that. And I became pretty unhealthy, both physically and emotionally and mentally. And while that was all happening, while I was slipping more into like a partying stage and just really not taking care of myself, I got another phone call. Actually, I got a text from a friend back from high school asking me if I was okay and if I had seen the news. That's all she said. And I had no idea what she was talking about. So I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean am I okay? I haven't even heard from you in months. What's going on? And she let me know that my ex-boyfriend, the one from high school who I had the really tumultuous relationship with, had also passed away. He passed away from what they told me was a stroke. I don't really know the details. I just know that he had been drinking heavily and wasn't in a good place either. And he ended up passing away during my junior year at USC. And his passing, even more so than Jenna's, brought out everything within me that I had so desperately been trying to avoid and desperately trying to push down. And it forced me to finally realize how much I needed help to heal from the trauma that I had experienced from him and to overcome everything from that relationship. So I turned into a giant ball of anxiety and depression. I didn't fully understand what I was feeling. I didn't understand why I was drinking so much, partying so much, why I was going from relationship to relationship. But I knew I wasn't okay. I knew I needed help. So one day, I distinctly remember having a panic attack in my sorority. This was like at a time where mental health was still something we weren't, like, as a society, fully talking about as much as we are now. So I called my parents sitting in my sorority basement. I called my parents and I said, I think something's wrong with my heart. Something's going on with my heart. And I thought that I had a heart arrhythmia or something like that. That's how little we knew about anxiety back then, or at least how little my family knew. Turns out I just was having a panic attack. My heart was fine. So in that moment, my parents and I discovered, okay, like, we need to do something about this. She's not doing okay. And I got my first therapist. I distinctly remember her name was Leah. She was in Larchmont, California. I would go and see her every week. And she was, for the first time, helping me unravel everything that had happened in my life. And it was to the point where I didn't even understand that those things that I had gone through were something that I needed to address. I can distinctly remember my therapist, Leah, asking me, like, okay, tell me about your family, about your relationship with your parents. Okay, tell me about your relationship with this guy from high school. Tell me about it. And I'm like, why are you asking me about this stuff? I don't need to talk about this. I'm good. I truly did not understand how much I was still carrying and how much it was still affecting me. Now, before I continue explaining this part of my story and telling this part of my story, I want to give another trigger warning. I want to give a trigger warning about suicide. So if that is something that is difficult for you to talk about and to hear, please turn the episode off right now and tune back in when you are in a safe space, or go listen to something else. But this is your official trigger warning for the topic of suicide. I want to take that really serious, and I want to really honor that because I know it is not easy to talk about. But okay, with that warning said, so fast forward, I graduate college, I'm still in therapy, and I start dating a different guy. A guy that I met just while out at a bar in Venice in Los Angeles. That's where I was living at the time after I graduated. And that relationship, once again, because I hadn't dealt with my old patterns or healed my old wounds fully yet, that relationship turned sour quickly. And it became really mentally, psychologically unhealthy. In that relationship, with the guy who I dated after college and while I was going through therapy, one night we had a terrible fight. I still don't even know fully what happened in that fight because I'd been drinking at that time. And something in the conversation, we were on the phone, something in that phone call caused me to completely snap. And I had an absolute, very serious mental breakdown. And in that mental breakdown, I threatened suicide. And because he was scared and because he was ill-equipped to handle everything I was feeling and everything I was working through, he ended up calling the police, and they put me in a psychiatric hospital overnight. And I shouldn't really even call it a psychiatric hospital because it was really just one room, and it was me in the room with a bunch of men, a lot of men who were on drugs, who were strung out. It was a very, very scary situation. Add on all of the really intense emotions that I was feeling at that time. So I spent the night, only one night, and the next morning they had a 2-minute conversation with me. I met with one of their therapists at the psychiatric hospital for literally 2 minutes, and they basically prescribed me Xanax and then sent me on my way. And I've always been a pretty natural person, so I didn't want to take the Xanax. I didn't want to get on medication, any more medication than I was already on. I actually was already on an antidepressant, which I believe mixing the antidepressant with the alcohol really contributed to me having that breakdown that night. Again, nobody had taught me not to do that. It was something I was totally oblivious to. So I was taking my antidepressants, my SSRIs, and drinking all of the time. Extremely unhealthy. I still was very unhealthy physically and emotionally and mentally at that time. But I knew not to add Xanax to the mix too, so I didn't take it. But what I did instead was I called my parents, I told them what happened, and they got me on a flight home the next day. So I went back to Michigan again, and I ended up staying there for maybe a month while I just really processed that night and that relationship and the breakup and everything I had gone through, and just was in a safe space with my family taking care of me as I really dove into my mental health. And while that night was probably one of the worst nights of my life, outside of finding out that Jenna had passed away and finding out that my ex-boyfriend had passed away, it also was the most important night of my life. Because when that happened, I was forced to really, even more so than I was already doing with my therapist, really dive into my traumas, really dive into what was going on and what was causing me to have the behaviors and the feelings and the reactions that I was having, what was causing me to continue to attract unhealthy men. I went from my high school boyfriend to this guy who both were very unhealthy and both mistreated me. What was that pattern? Why was that happening? I really had to look at myself in the mirror and say, things need to change. Your habits need to change. You are capable of so much more. You were created for so much more. Why are you settling for this type of life? There's more out there for you. And I don't tell this part of the story often, but it's a really beautiful part. Even when I was in that psychiatric hospital, while I was there, my boyfriend called me. He called the hospital and they gave the phone to me, and he broke up with me over the phone. And it really was, I didn't even care that much about the breakup. I was so hurt by him not being there for me in that moment that I just was kind of like, screw this guy. But it was so heavy at the same time because once again, I was going through a breakup. And I remember going into the bathroom of the psychiatric hospital and just kind of like crying out, both internally, and I was definitely crying externally too, really crying, and asking God, why won't these men fight for me? Like, why won't these men stay? I distinctly remember saying that, asking that question, and I heard back. I truly heard back from God. I heard him say, "What are you talking about? I have been fighting for you this entire time." It makes me emotional to think about because I heard it clear as day, and I don't know what you believe. I may sound crazy to you, but I know what I heard. And it was just such a beautiful moment where I just felt a wave of relief wash over me, even as I was in the middle of this not very safe environment, not very safe place, the hospital. I was literally surrounded by men. They had to put a cop in my section to watch me all night because I was the only woman. It just wasn't, I shouldn't have been there ever, honestly. And even in the midst of how scary that was, how many difficult emotions I was feeling that night, there God was. There he was showing up for me and providing me the reassurance and the hope and the relief that I desperately needed to make it through that night and the period of healing that followed that relationship. So from there, I started to make a change in my life. I started to step back into my faith. I was volunteering at my church. I dove even more into my mental health. I started going to a group therapy. I started doing what's called DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. I think that's the right word. It's been a while since I've been in that sort of therapy, but it was specifically aimed at people who really struggle with difficult emotions caused by trauma. So I was doing that. I was doing DBT and CBT. I also did what was called EMDR, which is a form of therapy that helps your eyes move in a specific pattern that triggers certain things in your brain that you can then process. I was doing a lot of different work like that. I was doing really intensive mental health work. I also was simultaneously really stepping into yoga and focusing on my physical health. I was going to meditation classes almost every night. I was doing breath work, sound baths, things like that. I dove in so heavily to every type of like healing modality that you can think of. And the healing modalities that I still am a part of today and that I encourage so many people to explore as a coach as well. So I really dove in and I really changed a lot of things about myself. I went from this person who was broken, and because she was broken and struggling so much, hurting so much, she was selfish. I had a tendency to lie. I there's just a lot of like a very big lack of my character and my integrity at that time because I was so deeply hurt. And I changed all of that. I really transformed my heart. I really healed my mental health, and I really became a different version of myself. I even went to a leadership college at my church and ended up working for the church. I just became a different person, and it was really impactful and really incredible to see. But still, even from there, I still had some old patterns and things that still would come up here and there. So even though I did all of that work, the pattern that I had of attracting unhealthy men didn't break right away. A lot of other things healed, but that didn't, not yet, at least. And so after that guy, we'll just call him psych ward guy. After that guy, I ended up dating, I'd say probably 2 really unhealthy men from there. Again, other unhealthy, toxic relationships. I was in at least 2 of them. Actually, let me correct myself. I was in at least 3. Some of them were situationships, so I don't even know if I should count them as relationships, but just bad situations with unhealthy men, with narcissistic men, with abusive men, with men who had their own traumas and their own wounds that they refused to look at least not yet. I attracted that type of man, and I allowed him and accepted him into my life for far longer than I would like to admit. And the real change in that specific pattern didn't occur until I was in a situationship when I was roughly 27, 28 years old, like back in 2021 is when me and this guy met. And we met at a time in my life where I was going through other difficult things. I was being bullied by 2 female roommates that I lived with, and I had just gotten out of a other situationship before this situationship that really hurt me. And I was just in a really vulnerable place. So when this last guy swooped on in, it was so easy for him to get me to be attached to him, to get me to give him my everything, my all of my attention, all of my time, all of my energy, because I was in a really susceptible place. I was really vulnerable. And so I started spending all my time with him. I traveled to Europe with him, not with him. He was going on a separate trip and we met up there, but we did like really romantic, intense things very early on. And it was, honestly, I see it as being even more unhealthy and even unhealthier relationship than my relationship with my high school boyfriend. Because my high school boyfriend, he was also a teenager. He also was 15 and he was, growing and developing himself. So as an adult, I can look back and hold so much grace and empathy for him. But the guy that I dated back in 2021, he was 32. He was a full grown man and he still was treating me even worse than my high school boyfriend treated me. He manipulated me. He lied to me. He was seeing numerous other women at the same time he was seeing me. I came to find out after we ended things. He had me so twisted up in myself because he was so good at gaslighting me that I truly could not see. I truly could not understand all that he was doing. And that's what a lot of the men before him did too. They were experts at manipulation and gaslighting to where I would end up losing my complete sense of self and completely being just confused and twisted up on what was reality and what was not. And it brought out all of those toxic, unhealthy behaviors in me because I still had like those patterns and those traumas that I was working through. So I had a lot of attachment struggles. I was explosive with my anger. These relationships brought out the worst parts of me, and they were really unhealthy and they were really damaging. And it was through that last relationship back in 2021, after I got out of it, that everything when it came to relationships specifically changed. And I believe today, 4 years removed from that relationship, I believe that the reason that was the catalyst for all of my change romantically, for all of my change relationally, was because I finally stood up for myself in that relationship. I finally got myself out. I didn't allow myself to go back. I removed myself. I cut him out. He's still blocked to this day. And I remember the last conversation, one of the last conversations that we had, I had written down everything I wanted to say to him and I got it all out. I just felt so empowered and so strong because I stood up for myself and I didn't let his gaslighting twist me up anymore. I stuck to what I knew to be true, and I stuck to the reality of the situation. I told him how he had hurt me. I told him what was happening, and I left. And I left that relationship. I left him in my past. And because I truly stood up for myself and then continued to stand up for myself in a few other dating situations from that point on, I discovered who I was again. And I fell in love with myself again. And I returned to the home that was already inside of me again. I really broke that pattern in those moments. And I'm so grateful that I had to do that work because I wouldn't have broken those patterns otherwise. I'm so grateful for all of those difficult relationships and experiences because I would not be who I am today. I wouldn't be in the healthy, fulfilling, safe relationship that I'm in today. I wouldn't be a relationship and dating coach who's helping dozens, hundreds of women and men around the world to break the same patterns that I have. I wouldn't have the business that I've built. I wouldn't feel the internal peace and wholeness that I've finally cultivated in my life. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of those very difficult, traumatic experiences and relationships. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my high school boyfriend, if it wasn't for Jenna, if it wasn't for my boyfriend who I dated after graduating college, if it wasn't for the two guys who I was in situationships with. All of those things, while they were difficult, had to happen for my growth. They had to happen for me to be able to now look at so many of you who I work with and say, I understand. I hear you. I get you. I see you. You're not alone. I wouldn't be able to empathize with you guys the way that I can if it wasn't for those experiences. So while I don't wish those experiences on anybody, and while I wish I could have learned the easy way instead of the hard way, I still have so much gratitude for every part of my story. Because it was after that last guy where I finally really just made a change in my relationship life. I had already been making a lot of changes in my character and in my heart, but relationally, I still was really struggling. And it was through him and through that breakup and through me discovering myself and standing up for myself that I learned so much about relationships and love and attachment and conflict and communication, and was able to attract a new type of man, a new type of relationship into my life. I also attracted new friendships. I attracted new business opportunities for myself. I shed all of those old blocks that were keeping me stuck in the same dead end, unhealthy relationships, in the same toxic friendships, in the same jobs that weren't giving me the income that I needed. I shed all of those blocks. I broke through those blocks and I was able to build the life that I have now. And while the life I'm living now isn't perfect, there are still things that I'm striving for, things that I'm dreaming of, struggles that I have. It is a million times different and better and healthier and more peaceful than it ever was before. I don't have anxiety anymore. I don't have depression anymore. I don't contemplate suicidal thoughts anymore. I don't allow anybody into my life who disrespects me or mistreats me. I am only surrounded by the best, healthiest, most amazing men and women. And to be able to say that is, sometimes I can't even fathom that I'm able to say that because I never thought it would be possible for me. But yet it is. Yet here I am living in Austin, Texas with my partner in a beautiful house with a huge backyard. My two dogs have the best life. They're able to run around outside all of the time. I am safe. I feel calm. I feel centered. I don't feel the need to pretend I'm something I'm not. I don't feel the need to compare myself to others. I don't feel the need to hustle to prove my worth, to try to get people to love me. I'm just different and my life is different and it's different. And I got to this place because of all I went through. So I hold so much gratitude for every single experience, every single person that I encountered along the way and that I'm still encountering. And I'm so excited to see where I go from here. But I wanted to share all of that with you guys, and still trust me, there's more details that I haven't shared because it just is so much. But I wanted to share more of my story with you all so you can understand that you too can experience the change that I've experienced. you too can experience the growth that I have and the transformation that I have. What you are going through now, what you're struggling with today, doesn't have to be a part of your future. It won't be the things that you're struggling with in the future. You can break old patterns. You can heal old mindsets. You can shed old wounds and stop having them control your present life. All of that is possible for you. If it was possible for me, it is 100% possible for you. So no matter what you're struggling with, whether it is an unhealthy relationship, a job that leaves you feeling unfulfilled, difficult family relationships, toxic, not healthy friendships, whatever it is that you're going through, if you're grieving the loss of somebody that you love, whatever it is, you can come out the other side and you can come out stronger and more whole than you ever were before. Let me be your testament to how true that is. And in the moments when you can't believe it, let me be the voice that reminds you that better is coming, better is on the way for you. I believe that for every single person who's listening to this. And I would love to guide you in understanding and really believing that and stepping into the future and the life that was created for you too. So if this resonated with you at all, if you have found hope in anything that I've said, please reach out. Let me know. Reach out to me on Instagram or TikTok at Coach Kate DeRocher. I'm much more active on Instagram, so probably reach out there. But I want to hear from you. I want to know what you're struggling with. I want to know how my story maybe gave you some peace and some encouragement. So please reach out, please DM me. And if you're interested in coaching, please head to my website, coachkatederocher.com, and fill out an application, and I'll contact you if we're fit to work together. I want to be here for you. I want to guide you towards creating the life that I fought tooth and nail to create for myself. I want to come alongside you as you do that same thing, as you go through that same journey on your own. So reach out, fill out an application, DM me. And again, if you are interested, if you're a woman listening to this and any of this, reminds you of your own story, then please join me and the other incredible women at my Wildly Capable for Women's Retreat this Labor Day weekend in Dripping Springs, Texas, August 30th through September 2nd. Everything that I learned to get me to this place is what I'm going to be sharing with you in that retreat. So I would love for you to be there. I would love to meet you in whatever capacity, whether it's just a quick Instagram DM, or we're grabbing a coffee in Austin, or you join the retreat, or we end up working together and have a coaching relationship. Whatever it is, I would love to meet you guys. It means the world that you've listened to this now 57-ish minute podcast. Who knows how long it'll be by the time I edit it, but it means the world to me that you tune in. It means the world to me that you gave me the space to just share my story, because it's not an easy story. And I know there's so much that people could judge me over when it comes to my story, but I know the change that I have created in my life and how it can create change in other people's lives. So regardless of what people think of me, I'm going to share that story over and over and over. So thank you for listening. Thank you for holding the space. Please, again, reach out. I would love to meet you. And I just can't thank you guys enough. I can't thank you enough for tuning in. I will see you here next time on Wildly Capable with Kate. Thank you all so much.